Okay, so the second half of Daniel 7, Daniel has asked specifically about the fourth beast. I think he is more troubled by that than the others. I think he understands the overall thrust of the vision because it matches the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had that Daniel himself interpreted for him back 40 years ago, or whatever that would have been in his lifetime. That would have been old. Second year Nebuchadnezzar was 603 or so BC. This is 550 BC, so that was over 50 years ago that Daniel interpreted that dream for Nebuchadnezzar. And he probably recognizes that his dream, his vision he just had, matches the content of Nebuchadnezzar's dream from 50 plus years earlier. So I don't think he's as confused about that part of his dream, but he wants to know specifically about that fourth beast and its horns. Then I wanted to know the true meaning of the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, and most terrifying, with its iron teeth and bronze claws, the beast that crushed and devoured its victims, and trampled underfoot whatever was left. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head, and about the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell. The horn that looked more imposing than the others, and that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the saints and defeating them, until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came when they possessed the kingdom. So, that's what the court scene was about. We read about that court scene. I went into detail about the various aspects of this court scene that the New Testament presents as being relevant now. This court scene this is happening. Jesus has entered. Jesus is the one like the Son of Man. He is into the presence of the Ancient of Days, and all these things are happening now and are current and ongoing now. And this court scene happened because it was triggered by the boastful words this little horn was speaking. Now this is all going to be after Daniel's time, and this is all going to be after the time of Antiochus Epiphanes IV, who comes along in the 160s BC. We'll read about him in chapter 8, and he's like a little horn. In fact, in chapter 8, Antiochus Epiphanes is also described as a little horn. Okay? So Antiochus Epiphanes in chapter 8 is given to us as a prefigure for the kind of person, the little horn of Daniel 7. But it's not the same guy, okay? This little horn in chapter 7 and the little horn in chapter 8 are not the same individual. But they're very similar. They are of a kind. One represents and pictures the other. Okay, so this little horn of Daniel 7 is not Antiochus Epiphanes, who is the little horn Daniel 8, but it's the guy who's going to be very similar to him. And this is after Daniel's time, and this is after the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. This little horn is actually Domitian, the 11th Roman emperor, and that's not going to be into the late 1st century AD. So the idea that Daniel predicted prophecy up to the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, and then someone forged this in his name and wrote about history after it already happened, in the horn of prophecy, that doesn't even explain the entire content of the book of Daniel, which goes all the way down to the time of Domitian at the end of the 1st century BC, AD, so well beyond the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, which was in the 160s BC. He gave me this explanation. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on earth, and as you saw in Revelation, it was the kingdom that was in control of that day. It was the Roman Empire that was in charge at that time. It was made up of parts of all the previous empires and beasts. It'll be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth, trampling it and crushing it. Of course, it didn't actually conquer the whole earth, but it conquered quite a bit of it. Okay, it ruled basically the known world at that time. Europe, down all the way from Western Europe, all the way to India, again, and down into Northern Africa. Again, it was made up of all the territories of the previous empires, and so it was pretty big. Paul in Colossians is going to say that even in his own day, of course he lived in the time of the Roman Empire, that the gospel had spread over all the world. Let's see here, Colossians, the very beginning of Colossians. Colossians chapter 1, starting in verse 3. We always thank God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, when we pray for you, because we have heard of your faith in Christ Jesus. He didn't know these people personally. Anyway, and of the love you have for all the saints, the faith and love that spring from the hope that is stored up for you in heaven, and that you have already heard about in the gospel, in the word of truth, the gospel that has come to you. All over the world, this gospel is bearing fruit and growing, just as it has been doing among you since the day you heard it, and understood God's grace and all its truth. All over the world. Now, that isn't literally all over the surface of the planet, because that wouldn't happen. I mean, Paul didn't even know that half the planet was even here. Okay? They weren't even going to find half the planet for 1,500 years after Paul. So, it isn't the entire world, but the Roman Empire did rule everything that they knew about at that point in time. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them, another king will arise. This will be the 11th king. Different from the earlier ones, he will subdue 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his saints and try to change the set times and the laws. The saints will be handed over to him for time, times, and half a time. But the court will sit, and his power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. So that little horn, that 11th emperor, that 11th king, is not going to win this war. It will seem like it for a while. For time, times, and half a time. That's 3.5 times. 3.5 is half of 7. 7 is the perfect number, so 3.5 is half the perfect number, which means it's only half. It's been halved. His time has been limited. His time has been halved. He's going to seem to be winning for half the time, for a limited time. But the court will sit, and his power will be taken away, and completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of the kingdom, under the whole heaven, will be handed over to the saints, the people of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will worship and obey him. Of course, that itself didn't happen necessarily in the time of the 11th horn, the 11th king. That happened when Jesus set up his kingdom at the days of Pentecost and following. So that specific element did not occur time-wise in the days of the 11th king. It's just that 11th king is going to come and be a nuisance to the people of God at that time, but he's going to be judged and taken away. And the people of God are going to outlast him, basically. This is the everlasting kingdom itself hasn't even manifested in physical form yet to this day. It's here on earth in spiritual form in the church, and it's been that way since Jesus left and the church was established on the day of Pentecost, which that did not happen in the days of the 11th king. So temporally wise, time-wise, this didn't happen in the days of Domitian, the 11th emperor. It happened in the days of the 4th beast. And that is the meaning of that rock that takes over the earth in the days of the 4th beast, part of the statue, in chapter 2. This is the end of the matter. I, Daniel, was deeply troubled by my thoughts, and my face turned pale, but I kept the matter to myself. So he did not talk about it to the people. I mentioned earlier that Daniel did not have a typical prophetic ministry. He did not speak the word of God to the people. And even here, when he had a vision and interpretation from God, he didn't tell it to anyone. He kept it to himself. So let's go ahead and read more about the beast as John sees it in Revelation. Revelation 13, continuing from where we were last time. So, the beast I saw resembled a leopard. It had feet like those of a bear, and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. Now, we don't read about the dragon in Daniel. That's a new detail that John is telling us, that that's where the power comes from, the dragon. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast. Men worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshipped the beast and asked, "Who is like the beast? Who can make war against him?" The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise his authority for 42 months. That's time, times, and half the time. That's 3.5 times. In this case, we're identifying it explicitly as 42 months. So 12. Time was 1 year, that's 12 months. Times is 2 years, that's 24 months, plus 12, 36. And half the time, that's 6 months. And half a year, that's 6 months, that's 42 months. So that's the time, times, 3.5 years, 42 months here in Revelation, excuse me. He opened his mouth to blaspheme God, and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. He was given power to make war against the saints and to conquer them. So he was allowed to win for a period of time. We read about that already in Daniel, about the little horn. And he was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast. All those whose names have not been written in the book of life belonging to the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the world. Let's skip ahead a few chapters to chapter 17. I'm not reading Revelation now, okay? We're not doing that right now, but we're going to highlight the important passages in Revelation that overlap with Daniel's own visions to help interpret what we saw in Daniel. Revelation 17, verse 3. The angel carried me away in the spirit to a desert. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. I think it's the same beast we just got done talking about. That was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She had a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. This title was written on her forehead: Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and abominations of the earth. I saw the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, so she is killing them and drinking their blood, and the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished, and the angel said to me, Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and the beast she rides, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. So here's the beast again. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and will come up out of the abyss and go to his destruction. So that's referring to he seemed to have a fatal wound that had been healed. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life in the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because he once was, now is not, and yet will come. So the fatal wound will not actually kill him. He will recover from his fatal wound. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 hills, or the 7 heads, are 7 hills on which the woman sits. It was well known, I'm not sure if it was figurative or literal, but Rome was a city that sat on 7 hills. So we're identifying this as Rome. This is the Roman Empire. This is the Roman beast, same beast as in Daniel's 4th beast. We're just identifying it now as Rome. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come, but when he does come, he must remain for a little while. The beast who once was, and now is not, is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. This is all confusing and complicated. We'll parse it through eventually, but bear with me for now. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but for 1 hour will receive authority as king over the beast. They have anyway. We're not going to get into the specifics about Revelation here, but the idea behind this is that we have 10 rulers of this 4th beast and the 11th ruler. And I believe that those 10 rulers are quite literally the first 11 rulers of Rome, starting from Augustus Caesar and going down to Domitian. You have Julius Caesar is the first guy named Caesar, but he was not the first emperor. That was Augustus, his adopted son, who takes the name Caesar as just the throne name of all Roman emperors from that point forward. So you have Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, another guy with a name that starts with C, And those were all New Testament emperors, and we actually hear about those mentioned in the New Testament. Then you have Nero, who was the fifth, and he was the guy who first started persecuting the Christians, the people of God. But he did that as a political expedient for his own sake. He did not initiate a program against the people of God empire-wide at that time. And then he committed suicide. And the empire had a civil war for a year or so that nearly defeated. That's the meaning of the beast that was, is not, and will come. The fatal wound that was healed. There was a moment in time when this almighty, invincible Roman Empire did nearly come apart. After Nero committed suicide, they had a civil war that lasted for a while, and then they had three emperors come and go in rapid succession. Galba, Otho, or something like that, Otho or something, and then Vitellus, I forget even what order they came in. And each of those guys only came and went in a few months. And so finally a dude named Vespasian came and solidified things. Vespasian was a Roman general. He had been actually fighting in Israel at the time. At the time, the Roman-Judea war had already broken out. They were fighting each other in Judea. And that happened while that was ongoing, while in Rome there was a massive internal conflict breaking out that almost threatened to bring down the entire empire. Eventually, Vespasian left the front lines, the battle against Jerusalem, or Judea, to go to Rome to solidify control, and he did so. So he was the ninth emperor. He left his son Titus in charge of the battle in Jerusalem, and Titus was the one who ended up conquering Jerusalem, and it was under him that the city was destroyed and the temple sacked once and for all. And he ended up succeeding his father Vespasian as emperor. He was the 10th. And then it was his brother Domitian, who was not part of the fight against the Judeans, who became the 11th horn. And I believe that is the 11th horn that's talked about in Daniel, and I believe that's the one that is identified as the little horn that came amongst of the 10 that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. Domitian thought highly of himself. He was not a warrior like his father and brother were, but he wanted to be. I think he was jealous of them for getting to fight in battles he was not able to fight in, either too young or to fight in, so I think he overthrew his brother at least. I can't identify exactly which of the three horns were uprooted before him. It could be a reference to the three emperors who came and went in rapid succession after Nero, when the empire seemed to have fallen but did not end up falling. It could be a reference to them. It could be a reference. One of them could be his brother Titus, who a lot of people think he might have killed. There's a lot of speculation that Domitian might have poisoned Titus. And that's how Titus died. We don't know that for certain, but that's been a very common theory throughout history. So he might be one of them. Domitian might have been responsible. I don't really know. I don't know if those three emperors, those three uprooted horns, refer specifically to men that Domitian himself overthrew. Domitian was the son of Vespasian. So Vespasian, by taking the throne and solidifying control of the empire after these three other guys came and went, Domitian might be given credit for doing what his father did, because that sort of thing does happen in terms of solidifying the empire after it nearly fell and these three other guys came and went in rapid succession. But Domitian did have a mouth that spoke boastfully. He did wage war against the saints. He did initiate a program of persecution against the people of God, who by the time were no longer Jews. Now, they did fight the Jews in the actual war against them earlier, but Domitian actually initiated a system-wide attack on the Christians, the people of God at that time. That was beyond even what Nero did. Nero attacked the Christians in Rome as a political expedient for his own purposes, but Domitian made an empire-wide policy that would last, off and on at least, for a couple hundred years. Okay, that was around the year. That was in the late 1st century AD, in the 90s or so AD. And that policy would last, at least intermittently. It wasn't all constantly ongoing, and it wasn't always empire-wide. But that would last for about 200 years, until the early 300s AD. And Domitian was the one who kind of started that. He inaugurated that trend of making an official policy to go after the people of God. Whereas Nero had done that first, but only as his own political expedient. Domitian also had a mouth that spoke boastfully. He thought of himself as God. He wanted to be worshipped as God. He was one of the emperors. Some of the emperors were more level-headed than others. Some of them demanded worship as God. Some of them didn't. Domitian did eventually demand worship as God. He did change. He did try to change some of the months of the calendar to be named for himself. So he fits the categories described here in Daniel exactly. So that, I believe, is who the 11th horn is, and that is who Daniel's talking about. Now that goes beyond Antiochus Epiphanes. Domitian was, I think, his years are given as 81 to 96 AD. So that's 200 years even after Antiochus Epiphanes comes along. In chapter 8, we're going to read about this guy, this Grecian ruler called Antiochus Epiphanes, who's going to persecute the Jews of his day. And that's in the 160s BC. And the so-called smart people want to say that Daniel was written during that time to encourage the people to fight Antiochus Epiphanes, and it wrote a history in prophecy form, and it's so accurate because all these things actually already happened. But that doesn't work because the prophecy actually goes all the way down to the days of Domitian in the late 1st century AD. So even there, that argument falls apart. Okay. I wanted to get through chapter 8, but I just can't. There's so much to talk about when it comes to Daniel. I just can't do anymore. So that's it for today, and we'll get to Daniel 8 next time. In Daniel 8, we're going to focus on the 2nd and 3rd empires. So we have these 4 empires: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. Babylon comes and goes, even in Daniel's own day. And then Persia, by the time Daniel dies, Persia's in control. And then he's looking down toward, and then the rest of the Bible, the rest of the Old Testament is going to be set in the Persian Empire. And then beyond that, we're going to have the Greeks, and beyond that, we're going to have the Romans. So in Daniel 8, we're going to broaden our view of history. Well, we're not going to broaden it. We're actually going to narrow it and look specifically at the 2nd and 3rd of these empires. The Medo-Persian Empire, which is coming, even Daniel's coming, he's going to see that come even as it happens. And then the Grecian Empire, which is going to happen a couple centuries after that. So that's what we're going to be focusing on in Daniel 8. And then later on, we're going to zero in specifically on a 3rd of those empires, the Grecian Empire, and give very specific prophecies about what's going to happen in the days of those kings, the Grecian kings, in the 200s and 100s BC. So we're going to we get more focused and more detailed as we go. We start out with this broad overview of history. We saw it in Daniel 2, and now we're seeing it again in Daniel 7. Then we're going to zero in on part of that history. Then we're going to zero in on an even closer part of that history. And that's how the book of Daniel is going to go. We'll get to that next time. I can't do any more for the day.